Some pioneers came across the upper part of New York State, then followed the lakes and went south. Most common way of travel was across southern Pennsylvania. There are 7 mountain ranges in southern Pennsylvania, so this route would have been difficult. Margaret Van Horn Dwight was a pioneer who came here from Connecticut in 1810. She traveled across Pennsylvania to Warren, where her cousin lived. Her trip took 6 weeks with a wagon and horses, yet she walked most of the way because walking was more comfortable than riding in a wagon. The Native Americans left the trail across southern Pennsylvania to us. Materials used to build cabins were trees. Trees were cut down, and the logs were either used as they were or sawn into flat planks for the walls. There used to be so many trees in this part of Ohio that a squirrel could jump from here to Lake Erie without ever touching the ground.
Pioneers made special doors that sometimes had a top half and a bottom half and were operated by a latch string. If they wanted extra light in their house, they could leave the top half of the door open and the bottom half closed so that farm animals wouldn't wander in. The latch string was like a doorknob. Pulling the string would open or close the door by lifting the latch up or down.
It didn't have many windows. If there were windows, families were often too poor to afford glass to put in them. Instead of glass, pioneers would often tack a piece of paper over the window and smear grease on it. The paper would absorb the grease and let light in.
Fireplaces were made out of stones. The top half of the chimney was made out of sticks and lined on the inside with mud. The mud would coat the sticks so they wouldn't catch fire when you put a fire in the fireplace. Over time, the mud did dry out, and occasionally the chimney would catch on fire. To prevent the fire from burning the whole house, pioneers would drop a pole against the outside of the chimney, and if it did catch on fire, they would run outside and pull the pole away from the top part of the chimney so it would fall away from the house.
A fat lamp, made of iron, the container would be filled with fat or grease from an animal. A piece of cloth was placed in the grease. When the cloth had soaked up the grease, lighting the end on fire would cause the cloth to burn very slowly like a candle wick.
This is a candle mold. Wicks were made by hand from plant fibers. The wick would be dropped all the way to the bottom of each mold. Animal fat was then boiled into wax and ladled into the individual molds. Tallow was another name for the fat used to make candles. When the candles had dried, they were pulled out. The mold was able to make a dozen candles at a time.
This is a jam light. This candle holder is portable because of its sharp point. By jamming it into the wall, the sharp point makes it possible to have light anywhere in the cabin. Coal miners gave it the name jam light because they could take these into the mines and jam them into the cracks in the walls to light the way.
Coffee beans are grown far away, so the pioneers would have to buy or trade for them at the general store. Pioneers would bring their own bag from home, and the storekeeper would fill it with whole coffee beans. The coffee grinder was necessary because the beans have to be ground up in order to make coffee.
Pioneers often made their own medicine from plants since doctors were few. This tool grinds up foods such as corn or herbs that pioneers used for making medicines. One herb the pioneers would grind up for medicine was cloves. Cloves were used for toothache. Chewing on cloves would numb the nerves on your teeth and relieve pain. Years later, doctors and pharmacists ground up their pills and powders to make their medicines with the same tool.
This is a soapstone skillet and foot warmer. Very soft stone that was ideal to use as a skillet because it could be put into the fire without exploding. Some kinds of stones did explode. Used for cooking pancakes and could also be heated and taken to bed as a foot warmer. This is a powder horn. If pioneers wanted meat to eat, they had to hunt for it themselves with a gun or a rifle. The gun needs gunpowder to shoot out the bullets. Pioneers carried their gunpowder in a powdered horn, which was as hollow cow's horn. The powder horn was waterproof. If gunpowder gets wet, it won't work. so it was important to keep the gunpowder dry. A little cap on the end of the gunpowder horn was used to measure the right amount of gunpowder needed for each bullet.
This is how the women washed clothes. They washed it by hand on a washing board. It took them a very long time.
Ironing was a very difficult chore for pioneer women. This iron is called a sad iron, and it weighs 6 pounds, about 6 times heavier than the irons we use today. Pioneers had to put the sad iron into the fire or on top of a stove to get it hot. The hot handle must be wrapped in cloth before picking it up to prevent being burned.
Most pioneer toys were whittled by hand out of scraps of wood, like the ball and cup. Many children were not allowed to play with toys on Sunday because Sunday was a day of rest and respecting God. However, one toy they were allowed to play with was the Jacob's ladder because its name comes from a man in the Bible named Jacob who had a dream about seeing angels and going up and down from heaven on a ladder. The wooden blocks go back and forth on a double-hinged ribbon. Checkers was a very fun game for 2 people to play in the winter when it was too cold to go outside. The board and pieces would have been made from wood as well. To make the black pieces black, they would have been burned in the fire.